Well, hello. Um, in this video, I'm going to try to answer this question. I'm not going to completely answer the whole question. I'm going to answer part of it, and I'm going to let you think about the rest. The question is basically asking you to write a class called fraction, and this class fraction define adding, subtracting, multiplying, and division fraction operators using, and you need to use operator overloading to get those operations done. So the idea is very simple. We need to start by creating a class called fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, class fraction. Now, just in case you don't know what is a fraction, fraction is basically when you have two numbers divided by each other. Like, for example, 5 divided by 10. Now, remember here, 5 divided by 10 doesn't equal 0.5. It's not half. Or if I say, let's say 2 divided by 4, that doesn't mean you're going to actually divide 2 by 4 and to get 0.5. No, this is not what we're looking for. We're looking at keeping the 2 as a 2 and the 4 as a 4 and not changing them and applying the operations that I was talking about, adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division. So any fraction basically will have two main integers. Let me try to remember. Denominator, I think, and I'll look for the right term in a sec. And we have public. I'm going to go and talk about that. Let me just get the right names for those. Terms. So we have the denominator, and we have the nominator. Let's see here. Where can I? Okay, let's go ahead and use this. Okay, so we have those two variables. For simplicity, I am going to take this away and take this away. Just keep it this simple. So those are my variables. Now let's just go ahead and create a constructor. So fraction. And I'll have a default constructor, and I have an argument constructor. So fraction again. And this time I'm going to put integer d and integer n. Of course, there are some certain rules that we need to think about here. I'm just going to simplify the process here. If you don't know what are the values, I'm just going to assign them to default values. So the default values that I'm going to go with is the num, I'm going to set it to equal 0, and the denom, I'm going to set it to 1. So basically, I'm going to be dividing 0 by 1, which is acceptable. That will give you a 0. Now, in this area here, I'll just set this to be d and this to be n, and I got this part done. Now, there's some details that you need to think about, but I'm going to take it out of this calculation. For example, if I said 2 over 4, 2 over 4 is basically the same as 1 over 2. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to ignore that fact that I can find the greatest common divisor and modify my values. I'm just going to keep it as it is. One thing we should always know is if d equals 0, you should set d to equal 1 because you're not supposed to divide by 0 with an error message. So I'll just put an error message here. Cout no 0 is 0. Let's put this 0 is not acceptable for So I cannot have 0. I cannot divide by 0. So I'm just going to change it to 1. So here we go. Those are my constructors. And of course, we need to always do not forget about the destructure. Fraction. It's empty. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and have a print method as well. So void print. And in this print method, I'm just going to show the value, cout, num, and I'll put the division operation. It's not that I'm going to divide them. I'm just trying to show the results on the screen. D num, and then let's go end line, semicolon. Why are you complaining about this? Change the signature. No, why would I want to change the signature? Oh, now it's gone. Visual Studio takes its sweet time. Okay, so here we go. Now we need to perform the overloading operator. Now what I'm going to do, and this is extremely important, I'm going to overload those. There are 4 operations. I'm going to overload one of them, which is the easiest one, and you're going to have to do your own research about the math behind the other operations and get it done by yourself. I'm going to provide a link just to help you finding out. So let's go ahead and talk about how do I add 2 fraction numbers. Well, first of all, we want us to perform the operator overloading. So I have some syntax that I have to follow. So let's create that function, and I'll go through the steps. First of all, we need to start with a keyword called friend. Now, friend basically means you will create a function inside a class, but that function doesn't belong to the class. It's very similar to actually creating the function outside of the class. Now the question is, why would you want to create a function inside a class to treat it as it's a function outside of class? Because if you create the function outside of class without using the keyword friend, of course, you would not have access to the variables of the function. But when you create a function and you define that function as a friend inside the class, that basically means you can have access to the private data members. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to go and create what we call a friend function. Right after that, I will start by typing what is supposed to be returned back. So when you have a fraction and you add it to a fraction, the result is going to be a fraction number. So I'm supposed to get a fraction as a result. That's a return data type. And then after that, you type operator and you put plus, because I am trying to overload this operator, the plus operator. Now in this area, what are you trying to do? You're trying to add 2 numbers together. So you have to come here and type fraction. I'll call this one F1 and the other one fraction F2. So I do have 2 values, or 2 objects, F1 and F2, and I'm trying to add them together. Okay, so in this area, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a fraction variable, a fraction object. I'm going to call it temp. This will store the results of adding F1 to F2 temporarily. And now I need to think about, how do I actually perform this operation? Now let me just go and show you that in a sec. Fraction addition. And I'm just going to look for a YouTube, sorry, not YouTube, a website that actually will simplify the process. So someone explain the concept. Well, I remember it. Do I really have to? When you have 2 numbers, let's just put them here in an example. Let's say 2 over 3 plus 1 over 5. If I want to add those 2 numbers together, this is what you would do. You basically would have a fraction that contains 2 parts. For the bottom, it's going to be 3 multiplied by 5. And for the top, it's going to be 2 multiplied by 5, where is it? Plus 1 multiplied by 3. So the bottom basically is going to be the multiplication of those two values. And the top is going to be each one of those values multiplied by the denom of the other value. So you see here 2 was multiplied by 5 and 1 was multiplied by 3. So this is basically how we perform these operations. So we need to come here and do this. So for the temp variable dot nom, which is the number at the top, it's basically going to equal, and this is very important, f1 dot num multiplied by f2 dot denom plus f2 dot num multiplied by f1 dot denom. So you close this and you're done calculating the num for the temp. Now you need to go ahead and calculate temp dot denom is going to equal, and again, f1 dot denom multiplied by f2 dot denom, and put semicolon here. And then after that, you come here and say return temp. Okay, so here we go. This is how we create an operator overloading. Now, there are multiple ways, of course, to do that. I'm just going to show you the one that could help you this time. You have to actually have a friend method. It's going to return a fraction because adding a fraction to a fraction will end up having a fraction. And then you have to type the keyword operator and what is the operation you're trying to overload, which is the addition here. Of course, if you want to add two numbers, then you're going to, you must have two fraction numbers. I called F1 and F2. And as you can see here, this is the math and this is what's going to happen. Now, one thing you should know also, when you pass fraction, this is going to be passing it by copy, which basically is against memory management, which I'm okay with it right now. I'll show you how to fix it in a sec. So I'm going to come here and say fraction, and I will call FR1, and let's put here 2 and 5. Did I use 2 and 5? Okay, we'll go with that. I'll go fraction FR2. Let's put 7 and let's put 8. Let's put semicolon here. And here I am going to show fraction 1 on the screen. So FR1 dot print semicolon. And I'll do the same thing here. FR2 dot print. Now I'm going to create a new fraction. Let's call it FR3. And then I'm going to say FR3 equal FR1 plus FR2. And then after that, FR3 dot print. And I should be able to see the results of adding those together. To simplify it, I'm just going to put numbers that I know it's going to give me. Let me just run it to make sure that it's going to work. Oopsie daisy. No. What? Oh, my bad. My bad. That was me. I'll say return. Don't worry, this is not part of that project. It's something out of laziness. Oh, of course, this one is going to give me no, actually that worked. And here it is, 5784, 51 divided by 14. Oh, wait a minute. I think I missed something here. Where's the print method? Num, denom. So, how did I end up 5 over 2, not 2 over 5? Let's see here. Oh, you passed the D and the N. That's where I made a mistake. So let's put N here and put D here. So, so D is going to go okay. If D equals 0, and then, okay, now this should work. Let's just give this a try again. Okay, now that this makes a lot more sense. 2 divided by 5, and that's okay. Let me just change numbers. I will put 1 over 2, and then here I'll put 1 over 4. So yeah, if you add half to a quarter, you're supposed to get 3 over 4. And if you look here, 6 over 8 is basically 3 over 4. So here it is. This is how it works. Now, can you imagine what exactly you're supposed to do with the other operations, subtraction, multiplication, and division? For the subtraction, I'm just going to tell you, all you have to do is replace this addition with subtraction. Multiplication is going to be different. Division is going to be different. As I said, I'm going to provide you with a link about how to, what is the math for those additional operators. So just think about here, you just need to complete let me just copy them here, subtraction, multiplication, and division. This is the only part that you have to do, and it's very similar to what I just did here. Okay, so this will be the end of this question. I'm going to be moving on to the next question in a sec. Okay, so let's start with the second question of this video. And in this question, I'm going to answer this question. Basically, you need to read a text file, and then you need to store the words in this text file in a vector. And then after that, you need to be able to search for a word in that vector. So in this file, in this example, I'm just going to show you how do you read from a file and how do you show the results on the file. And it's going to be your responsibility to store whatever you're reading to a vector by creating a vector and just push back those words to a vector. So it's straightforward. We're now going to get to that point. I'm going to talk about how to do it. But the whole point here is the question is, how do I read from a file? And then after that, after you read from a file, you need to ask yourself this question: how do I store the values in a vector, which is going to be your responsibility? It's a very, very easy statement. But the difficult part is, how do you actually have the counter, which I am going to show you the basic idea of that without actually getting it done. So let's go ahead and start with this lab. Now, number one, before you do anything, you need to have the file that you want to search for a word you want to read. So I do have a file that I created, and the text file is basically this one. I called it lab1. And this is just a text that I copied from a website. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to copy the file. Remember, I do have the file in my computer. I'm going to copy the file. Very, very important. Where are you going to store the file? To make your job easy, you have to store it next to your source file. So I do have a file called source1, which I'm going to use here. So you click on the project, and you go all the way to the bottom, open the folder, and then this window is going to pop, and you have to put it within the same folder. So it's inside project 6. Here's the file. Double click on it, and you can read it now. To read from a file, there are a few steps that we have to go through, and I'm going to go those steps and show you what do we do. So first thing first, I'm going to come here and create what we call a stream file, a read input stream file. So I'm going to start if stream. I will call it, for example, my file. And here I just going to have to type the name of the file that I just decided to use, which again, let me go back to the file. I just want to make sure that I don't make mistakes. It's called lab1. Let me just copy the name here, rename it, copy it, and paste it here. So this is the file that I'm trying to read, and I believe I still have to include another header file here. It's called the fstream file. So here we go. This is the fstream file, and this is my first step. Now, second step that I need to do is to create a string. So I'll just go ahead and type string. I'll call it str. This is where I'm going to read the strings the words from this file. Since I'm using strings, it's a good idea to actually have the string header file included. Okay, so here we go. I got the string header file included. What else do I need? Well, let's start with the process of trying to see if I can open this file. Now, this is an important step because sometimes, let's say we're going to ask the user to specify the location of the file, or the file that I just typed here doesn't exist. So I just don't want my program to crash. So I'm going to start with a keyword if statement, a very simple one. And I will say, if my file, you know what, let me just put an uppercase F here, dot open. Well, before I dot open, let me just try to see if I can open it. So here we go. This is an if statement. So if I was able to open the file, which I should, because I do know it does exist, then I will get into, let's see here. Yes. Now I need to start the process of reading from the file. If I couldn't open the file for any reason, I will just skip everything you see here. So let's go ahead and start reading. Now, to read from a file, you need to have a while statement. In this while statement, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to say my file, and I'm going to type the insertion operation, and I will say str. Now this operation here, it basically means as long as you can read from the file. I already checked here if it's open and I can open it or not. Now that I can open it, I'm going to start reading. And the way that this object works is it's going to read the file that I just showed you word by word, and it's going to store the word inside the string. So I'm going to read that string. Let me see here. Okay. One of the issues that we're going to have here is by reading the file, there are two chances. And by the way, the space is going to be used as a separator between the files. But let's imagine I read a file, and this is very important. I read a file, and the file contained, what do they call it? Like a not alphabetic character. So this is something we have to you have to think about. Like, for example, let me just go open the file. And let me open it here. For example, this word here, healing. You see, we have a dot here. This could be a problem because later I'm going to be searching for a word, and the word you're going to be searching for may not contain that this dot here. So we need to make sure that whenever you read a file, if the last character is not an alphabetic character, then you're just going to have to take it out. You don't want that. See here, sick, for example, there's a comma here. 2, there's a comma here. So I need, whenever I'm reading root, whenever I'm reading a word, I need to get rid of those. If the word ended with those type of characters, so I need to get them out of the system or the word. So to do that, basically, the idea is not very complicated. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to create an integer to measure the length of the string. So I'll say lenstr. And here, as I'm reading the word, I need to actually store in that variable. So I'm going to just say str dot length. Now this function here, str length, is going to tell me how many characters do I have in the word I just read. So again, let me go ahead and open that file. It's going to read, for example, Bloodborne, and it's going to tell me how many characters I have. And it's going to move to the is. It's going to tell me how many characters. It's going to treat A as a word, 1 character. This whole thing is going to be treated as 1 word. It's going to tell me how many characters, how many characters, how many characters, until even the 4 that you see here is going to tell me that, oh, you have 2 characters here. You got the 4 and you got the dot. It here, 3 characters. And as you can see, it's going to go that way. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have a variable called length str to store the length of that variable. And I'm going to do something very simple. I will say if. Now this is very, very important to pay attention to. I'm going to try to check and see if the last digit that I have is actually a number or it's an alphabetic character. So what I'm saying here, there's a function called is ALNUM. And I'm saying is alpha, this function basically could be read as, is it alphabetic character, or is it a number? So what I'm basically, I should be applying it to a character. So which character I'm talking about? I'm talking about the last one. So it's the string itself dot at, basically that's going to return that character. Now I have to tell where's the location of that character. Now, as you remember from from arrays, we said if I told you that the array have 5 elements, we start counting from 0. So the index or the location of the last variable is going to be whatever the number of numbers that I have minus 1. And I do have the number of digits, the number of characters that I have, which is LENSTR. So I'm going to use that, but I need to subtract 1 from it. So that will give me the last digit. So this part here is going to check if the last character that I have is actually an alphabetic character or it's let's say a number. Now, if that's the case, then what I need to do, and I'm going to do it here, this is where you create a vector. This is again where you create a vector. And the type of the vector should be strings. String type. Okay? In this area, this is where you're going to push back str to the vector. And that's basically what we're going to do. Now, the question is, what if this condition is not true? Where is it? It's not actually an alphabetic character or anything. Well, if that's the case, we need to be a little bit smart. And I'm going to explain what I'm going to do here. I need to convert that last digit to be what we call the null character. Now, you may ask, what is the null character? The null character is basically a character that defines the end of a string. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and do that. str at this index, which is the last character, and I'm just going to set it to the null character. Now look at the null character here, it's \0. Now what am I doing here? Let me just explain this step here. If I go back to the steps, let's imagine I read this root. The null character is basically after this comma here. We have a character called the null character. The null character is going to define that this is the end of this string. What I did here, I replaced the comma with that null character. So basically, this is going to define the new text without the comma. So this is the first thing I'm going to do. And then after that, just like I did here, I'm going to push back that str. So basically, you have one of those two options. It could be this is going to be implemented or this is going to be implemented, one of them. If the last digit is an alphabetic or numeric value, then yes, go ahead and just push it. If it's not, then convert the last digit to a null character. Sorry, convert the last character to a null character and just push it to your... and that's it. So this while loop is going to go for a while until you actually read every single string in that file. After that, you just need to close it. So I'm going to do that, my file.close. And I am done with the first part. So now at the end of this part, I got all my vectors. Sorry, I got all the strings inside the text file stored inside the vector. And this here is a perfect example of why vector is more important than array. Because if I told you to use an array to get this job done, there's no way you can do that, because again, you don't know how many words you have in this text file. But with vectors, we said every time the vector gets filled up, you're just going to extend and double the size for it until you're done. So I am done with that part. Now, if I want to know how many words I have in this vector, use size method to count, to show how many words in the text file. This is just an extra thing. If you want to go through all the files for the testing purposes, again, use iterator use to view the vector. And now we need to actually have a function to search for the word. So I'm going to have to create a function for that purpose. I'm not going to show you how the function would work. I'm just going to explain it to you now. So I'm going to just type cout, and I'm going to call it how many. Okay. So how many basically need to have two arguments. The first one is going to be the word that you're searching for. For example, I'm looking for the. And then after that, the vector should be passed. And then end line, semicolon. Now I'm just going to convert this into a comment so you'll understand that this is how you're going to do. So you're going to create a function called how many. You're going to pass two arguments, the word that you're searching for. The whole point here is to create a function that will tell you how many times the word that you're searching for occurred in that file. And again, so you have to type the name of the vector here. It depends on what you're going to call it here. And then you're going to pass the word that you're searching for. So let's go ahead and create the function at the top here. The function basically is going to return an integer. And I am going to go ahead and create that function with the signature and everything. So let's go ahead and put it here. So here we go. Now he's complaining about Victor. He said, I don't have it. I don't know what's a Victor. So that basically means I need to include Victor. And since you're going to use iterator, so you need to include that as well. So here we go. Now the idea here is very simple. You need to have, just like the one that you're going to create here, to go through all the elements. And I'm sure I explained that. And you can go back to the videos and the files where we talked about vectors. You need to go through the elements in that vector one by one. Now, before I show you how to do that, you need to have an integer called counter. Set it to 0 because this is the one that's going to count how many times that word appeared. And what I'm going to do something extra, I'm going to create a string and I'm going to call temp. This temp basically is going to store the word you're going to read from that vector. Okay. Now, what do we need to do here? We need to have a for loop in this area. We need to have a for loop to iterate. Iterate the vector elements. So I'm just going to put it in points. Point number 2, store each element in temp. So you're going to read those, put it into. Now the problem that we have with temp is, I said put under consideration that the word could be all lower cases, all upper cases, or all the first letter to be uppercase. So the question is, what do I do for this case? Well, let's see here. There are multiple ways to answer this question. The first thing I can think about is to convert whatever you're going to read. You need to convert. You need to find a way to convert, and I'm just going to put it here. This is going to be your responsibility. And again, there are multiple options here. Number 3. You know what? I'm supposed to be able to do that here at the top here before I do anything here too. This ST that you have here need to be converted to all lower cases. So convert ST to lower cases. So basically what I'm saying here, if ST has any upper cases, you need to find a way to convert the whole thing to lower cases. And if it has any punctuation or it has any digits, just leave it as they are. So this is something that you're going to have to figure out. And I'm sure if you just do a simply, I'm going to show you one way to do that. The idea here to do this, I'm just going to show you that really fast. So I'm going to put it in a form of a comment. Remember, this has to be applied to this ST and every single string you're going to read from the vector. So what I'm doing here, I need to calculate the size. The size of what? Of ST. So I need to come here and type, well, what is it? Let's say size equal st dot length. So I did calculate the size of it, and then after that I'm going to go through the characters one by one in this for loop, and I'm just going to say, instead of temp, just put st here and put st here. Look what I'm doing here. I'm basically checking if it's an alphabetic character. Okay, that's the character I'm talking about. And at the same time, it's an uppercase. Then go ahead and convert it to a lowercase. So this will be applied to ST. And inside the loop, here, inside this loop, you're going to have to do the same thing for temp. So just say the same thing we applied here for the ST has to be applied to the temp. So convert the temp to lower cases character. Okay, just like we did here. You can just copy the code that you see here, and instead of using ST, convert that and make it to use the length, the temp. Sorry, yeah, the temp. Okay, so after you're done with the for, and you're still inside the for loop, by the way, you just converted the temp to a lower cases. You just need to have an if statement. Compare ST to temp using the double equal sign. True, like basically they do equal. Increase counter by 1. Okay, which is basically means, again, counter plus plus, just increase it by 1. And this is 5. Otherwise, just keep going. There's no need for an else here. You don't need to do anything. If it's the same, increase it. Otherwise, keep going with the while loop. Okay. And then after that, I will just come here in this area. After you're done, end of loop. So after you're done with the loop, return counter, and I'm done. And this is basically how it's done. So let's go back here from the beginning. I'm just going to go real fast. You need to have those variables declared. You need to have an object to read the file. You need a string to store the files you're going to read, store the strings you're going to read from this file. You need to have a variable to measure the length of the files you're going to read. And then you need to have this vector created. After that, you're going to open the file. If I was able to open it, then okay, I'm going to go through a while statement. Then I'm going to read all the elements from that file. This is very similar to cin, as you can see here. Then I'm going to measure the length of the file that I read. And then after that, I'm going to see if it's an alphabetic or numerical value, then just push it to the vector. Otherwise, convert the last digit to be a null character. That basically get rid of the dot and comment that you have at the end of the string and push it. Right after I'm done with the while loop, I'm going to have to close that file. And right after that, I do have those optional operations. And then after that, I got a function called how many. I'm going to pass the word I'm looking for. I'm going to pass the Victor I created here and I populated here. And then after that, I do have this money function here that contains those comments.